All right, we are live.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. If you're living here in the UK, but good morning, I think, for pretty much everyone else who's on this call at the moment. And welcome to the monthly board meeting of Creating the Future. We've got a slightly different sort of way of doing things this month, in that I'm going to be facilitating the session today. I'm one of the board members, and I'm Carl. But what I'd like to do is begin by going around and asking everyone to introduce themselves. If you can, if it's relevant, acknowledge the land from which you are on, and say a little bit about that. But also tell us what's been awesome in your life since we last appeared in this part of the world. So I'm going to pick on someone to start, and because he never goes first, I'm going to start with Dimitri, please.
Welcome, everyone, whether it's morning or afternoon or evening, depending on where you are. I am Dimitri Petropoulos. I'm coming to you live and in person from Tucson, Arizona. It is already hot here, so we are looking forward to our amazing summer. My awesome continues to be the fact that I am now a grandpa for the first time, which is pretty cool. Looking forward to a little bit later this summer, we're planning to go and visit my son and get to meet little baby Athena. So that's my awesome, is the fact that we've set a family vacation up to be able to do
that. Thank you, Dimitri. Now we've got a hand up from Laurie, who, Laurie, I'm afraid we haven't had a chance to talk yet, but you're joining us for the first time this month's meeting. Are you well?
I am well, and I actually didn't mean to put a hand up. I apologize. Since I'm here. So I am the board president of a nonprofit community center in Madison, Wisconsin. I'm actually in Janesville, Wisconsin, but the nonprofit is in Madison. And probably my awesomeness right now is our son is graduating with a PhD in physical therapy this month. So we're very excited for him.
Wow.
Wonderful. Laurie, could you just share a little as an introduction of what brought you to Creating the Future and what brought you to want to be here with us today?
Sure. So you were referred to me by A.B. Orlick, who is our development director. I don't know if anybody knows A.B., but she had great things to say about your organization. And we are just now, we're trying to, like Joe Biden talks about building back better, we're trying to come out of the pandemic with some lessons learned and not just do what we did before the pandemic, but do things better and differently. So we're just beginning a strategic thinking process and thought this might be a useful tool for some of our board members to hear.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And if you click on the little raise hand thing down on the bottom of your screen, your hand will go away.
Oh, thank you. I was trying to actually clap for the new grandbaby. That's what I was trying to do.
Thank you, Laurie. Okay, who would like to go next?
Well, I jumped in already, so I will happily go next. I'm Hilda Gottlieb. I am in Tucson, Arizona, which is the traditional lands of the Tohono O'odham. And it is warm here in the desert, and it is desert warm. So when it's as dry as it is here in the desert, it will be 60 degrees when we wake up in the morning and almost 100 in the afternoon. And in Celsius, that's about 15 starting in the morning and could be as high as 35 in the afternoon. So that's our lives here in the desert. My awesome was stolen by the man who is sitting next to me, who doesn't look like he's sitting next to me, but actually is, which is that we are going to see not just our new grandbaby, but we're going to see all our kids. And all of the kids have not been together. You know, nobody's been together But all of our kids have not been together since this whole thing started. And so everybody is we're renting a huge house in Lake Tahoe. And all of us are just going to hang out for several days. And oh gosh, the most important thing was that it needed to have a big kitchen because everybody loves to cook. So that's my personal awesome, my creating the future awesome. I don't know if you can sort of see, but there's a huge mess of flowchart behind me. We are really stepping into what is next for creating the future, and that is a flowchart of everything that we are going to need as we are resourcing, as we are creating communication platforms, and et cetera. It's why I'm so excited about our conversation today, because all of those pieces parts, it's going to be, what does integrity look like there? And what does the board want to know about that? What is the board? So yeah, it's just very exciting to be at that point and to begin moving forward into what is next for creating the future.
Thank you, Hildy. Fantastic as ever. Who would like to go next?
Carl, can I just introduce Jackie?
Yeah, please do.
Because I'm just like really excited that Jackie is here. Jackie volunteered, and this is her first meeting with us, to be what we have affectionately called our documentarian, documenting the questions that we ask, the answers that we come up with, so that we can blog it and share it with the world. And I've just been thrilled learning a little bit about Jackie's history, and you've been doing the work and applying catalytic thinking to the work that you're doing and facilitating. And if you could just introduce yourself, tell us where you are, and just a little bit about what brought you into here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Hildy. As you mentioned, my name is Jackie. So hello, everyone. I am joining today from Michigan, the ancestral lands of Shawnee, Potawatomi, and Ojibwe peoples. And as Hildy mentioned, I kind of came across creating the future and have applied some of the creating catalytic thinking ideas in my own work. And when I saw the opportunity to volunteer, I was just really excited to have the opportunity to give back and kind of help move the work forward. So I'm really glad to be here afternoon here in Michigan. So thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Nice to know that we are powered by volunteering around these parts. Who would like to go next?
I'll go. Good morning, everyone. This is Vu. I am in Seattle, which is on Duwamish and Coast Salish land, and I use he/him pronouns. Awesome. I found a massage therapist that I liked. So I don't know, they're always really painful, and I haven't had a massage in like 2 years. Anyway, I don't want the painful massages with the elbows and everything. I just want to be swaddled like a baby and gently patted down on my cheek. So I found a really nice massage therapist and prepaid for 30 hours. So I'm getting a massage a week. He's fully vaccinated. I am too. And it's been really nice. So that's my awesome. I highly recommend it.
Good luck in writing that one up, Jackie. Who would like to go next? Eli, you take your mic off. Yeah.
Yep, I can jump in. Eli Angote, dialing in from Alameda, California. Traditionally, the Ohlone Native Americans occupied this land. My awesome is that I touched back down on Tuesday last week from 5 weeks in islands of Hawaii. So it was an incredible time to reset, enjoy nature, some of the most beautiful, spectacular landscapes I have ever seen. The Native people are wonderful. They're kind, and I just felt so embraced by the strong sense of grounding in culture and tradition. I was also very fortunate to get my first jab in Maui. They were kind to extend that to people who were not local. So I'm ready to get my second dose in a few weeks and hopefully get back into meeting people. And I'm so grateful to be here and do this work with all of you. Thank you.
Fantastic, Eli. Dimitri?
Carl, I just want to remind folks that who are watching that we are monitoring the Twitter channel with the hashtag creating the future. And if you have your own awesomes you want to share and maybe where you are, along with comments throughout our meeting today, I just want to remind folks that that is available and that I will be monitoring it and will help incorporate the comments into our conversation today.
Fantastic, Dimitri. Thank you. Everyone, you'll see we've just been joined by Justin Pollock. But before I come to Justin, Angie, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Angie Eikenberry. I'm in Omaha, Nebraska, and I'm on Omaha and Sioux land. I have two awesomes to share with you. One is related to, I guess, more work and connected to thinking about the land that we're on and trying to think about reparations or other ways that we can address the wrongs of the past. And one small way that I've been trying to do that is integrating more anti-racist and community-centric fundraising approaches into my fundraising class that I taught this last semester. I don't know, I think fairly successfully. There's still a lot of work to do, but certainly students' feedback has been that it's really changed the way they think about and fundraising, and it sounds like already starting to do fundraising in different ways. And so maybe, yeah, Boo and Hildy, you were both big inspiration to the students, to the class, and sometime we should get together and chat more about that and how I can continue to improve. So that was one awesome for the semester. We're just in the end of the semester right now. And my personal awesome is, I guess, building on others have said, being fully vaccinated. We're doing things like my daughter is going to go back to school on Wednesday for the last 2 weeks of her junior year of high school. So that's pretty exciting. And we're kind of making plans for hopefully doing some traveling a little bit here and there this summer. And, we're actually going to have an in-person dissertation proposal defense next week. So that's pretty exciting too. So it's good to see everybody.
Good stuff. Thank you, Angie. Justin.
Welcome and thank you. I'm Justin Pollock, so I am in Nacotchtank land and also Piscataway, which is also Washington, D.C., which is a whole nother realm of beings that live in this place now. My awesomes, the first is very personal, that I can actually breathe through my nose again. I broke my nose a couple of weeks ago. A stray pitch from my daughter playing softball hit me. And that one. And then professionally, actually, the reason I am late here is that an organization that I worked with 5 or 6 years ago, doing a totally different approach to strategic planning, because they didn't want to do it. They wanted some more work on their design and identity. And we actually had to, in order to appease the gods at that point in time, we had to do a traditional strategic plan plus this organizational design thinking and identity work. And I don't know if I mentioned this before, but I just got off a call with the leadership team that wants to take this identity and profile work, which is really about core values, beliefs, assumptions, how they talk about their outcomes. And they want to figure out how they make that, like, how do they use that and rethink what it means for a leadership team to be strategic in an organization, so they don't have to do strategic plans anymore. So that was pretty wild and exciting for me.
Fantastic. And I didn't know that you had the accident, Justin. So well, I'm glad that you're okay. That sounds horrible.
It had its ups and downs, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So everyone, just to complete the set, I'm Carl. co-wilding. I think I'm describe myself sometimes as creating the future's European representative, though Angie Ikenbury muscles in on that from time to time when she comes over to the UK. I'm based in a place called St Albans, which is just outside London. And my awesomes, well, a bit like some of the people on this call, I am now a jobbing consultant. And my awesome, I guess, has been that I thought I was pretty useless. And a few people have been very nice to me and said that actually I'm not useless, which has been a huge amount of fun. And my personal awesome, well, I guess again, like everyone else, we're just coming out of COVID here in the UK, and I've had my jab as well, and I'm getting ready for my second one soon. So with a fair wind and providing everything goes well, my awesome next month will be that I've been to the pub and I've had a beer. That's what I'm really looking forward to. None of this sort of civil society rubbish. That's the really important stuff in life. So I'm afraid that I am, as I said, facilitating today, so it's probably all going to be awful. But let's hope it's not. I've got some. I've got a list of the things that I'd like us to talk about today, and I've got some ideas about how roughly to keep us to time. So our challenge today, should you choose to accept it and stay with us, is that we want to talk about how the board is going to activate our integrity role, this challenge that we've set ourselves about being an integrity board, and what that's going to look like in practice in terms of the day-to-day work of the organization. You'll know from anyone who watches these conversations that they're very sort of exploratory, they're very iterative. We're not going to come out of this with all the answers, and you'll see us thinking out loud, literally, as we take forward the conversation. So as Dimitri said before, if you're one of the people that's watching us and you're on the Twitter, please do take part in the conversation, and Dimitri will feed in your thoughts and questions for us, and your ideas and solutions, hopefully, as well, because the way that we do these things is that we're clear that we don't have all the solutions, and that's why we're having the conversation. So I want to start by, first of all, saying to everyone, from the conversation that we had at the board last month, are you clear as we start this conversation about what we mean by an integrity board? Could, for anyone watching it, maybe who didn't see last month's conversation, could someone explain what we think an integrity board is?
Tildy, it looks like you were going to say something.
I'm looking to say I don't want to always be the one that's saying something. But thanks, Angie. A little bit of history is probably helpful in terms of what we mean by an integrity board. The very, very simple answer, and I love the way Justin frames that it's not really an integrity board, but an integrity body, because there are so many people involved. You know, Lori is here, Jackie is here. We always have guests. We always have folks who are watching. That this really is and the story that Vu told, it's got to be a year ago, that I have repeated a million times, Vu, which is the story of asking young children to draw a fish. That when we talk about a board, we have an image of what we think that means, and everybody's got that image, and that's not what this is. So so just trying to get away from that word board, which we continue to use because that's our language, but just trying to hold the space for that. Probably about 5 years ago, we started down a path of looking at not board, but organizational structure. Does a hierarchical structure lead to, is it the best structure for leading to significant change in the world? We looked at a flattened structure. We looked at you know, holacracy and all those other things that are out there, and still realized that what was at the center of that flattened structure still was a CEO, still was a group of people who are seen as leadership. And what we were looking at is, does that may work in the business world, but does that work when your goal is to create significant change in the world? And so the answer we came up with is that decisions would be made locally by the folks who were affected by that decision, community members, people doing the work, et cetera. And that the center of that sort of networked platform would be our values, would be collective enoughness, would be folks could find resources, folks could find each other, but that it would be more movement-like and more community-like than organization-like. Which led to the question, of course, of, okay, we legally have to have a board. What does that mean the board does? If decisions are made locally, what does that mean the board does? And back in 2019, came up with the thought that the board will be about ensuring we are walking the talk and meeting the expectations of the people in our community. And we spent many, many meetings talking about who are we accountable to, who are we, whose expectations are we meeting? And it really, really, really came down to the role of the board is to constantly be engaging in that conversation of what will meet those expectations, walking the talk of our values. And so that's really what we're looking at when we say an integrity body is integrity to the expectations of regulators. So that compliance piece and acknowledging that that's a small piece of what we're doing, not the whole piece. Just like when you live your life, you don't live your life around filing your taxes in April. You live your life around living your life. And oh, by the way, you have to file your taxes. And so compliance being just one of the many pieces, but the integrity really is around what does it look like to.
I've just lost you. Or is that just me?
Yeah, I lost the sound too.
So Hildy, we've just lost the sound from you there.
To me, that's okay. Hang on. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah,
Yes.
I can just about hear you.
All right, I'm going to talk. I'm going to talk through Dimitri's mic and finish up, and then I'm going to figure out what's going on with my machine. So the bottom line is, are we walking the talk of our values? You see all the stuff I pointed to before, the pieces parts of all the work in everything that we're doing. Are we walking the talk of our values in how we do our accounting? Are we walking the talk of our values in how we do our hiring, in our compensation policy? And importantly, what does the board want to know to make sure we are walking the talk of that? So that's my spiel, and I'm now going to figure out what's going on with my microphone.
So Hildy, whilst you're figuring out what's going on with your microphone, I'm going to do things a little bit differently today. And I want to especially ask Jackie, I know you're taking notes, Jackie, but Laurie as well. And actually Eli, because you're relatively new to the board, is the way that Hildy described what an integrity body is, does that make sense to you?
100%. And for me, what really hit hard was this metaphor about compliance and the focus of compliance. And the question, is that what people talk about when they're sitting at the dinner table? And I realized that no, nobody spends a lot of time talking about the technical compliance pieces of not just the family, but even in kind of in business. We end up, working with the ins and outs, the specifics of what needs to happen. And the values are key. It is literally what determines how decisions are made, which is what determines the outcomes of things. So I am 100% aligned with that. I am thinking about that in our own organization as we start to hire people in the United States for the first time directly as employees. Just investing a lot of time in asking those questions. What is it that we want these people to believe in? Right, so that they can join our group and we can have this cohesive long-term relationship versus just coming together to achieve something specific. I just read something recently about movements versus organizations, right? Movements are focused on something ambitious that affects everyone versus just getting, complying with something and achieving a specific goal, right, for an organization or company. So I think creating the future is a movement, and it behooves us to really think deeply about those values, which is why this integrity piece is so important. So looking forward to helping to carve out, those values and soft, fuzzy elements of how people make decisions.
Thank you, Eli. Laurie.
I agree. I thought Hildy's description and explanation was really useful, especially the filing the tax piece. I will be honest, I tend to be the regulator type on our board because I used to be the regulator. I used to work with government and do that regulating. It has made me think, I think we have spent short periods of time developing those goals and philosophies, but we don't visit them regularly, like at every board meeting. So it sounds like we've got some work to do to make sure that we're incorporating that into our daily work. So I thought the description was very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, Laurie, thank you. Jackie, do you want the opportunity to join us at that point?
I don't think I have anything new to say. I would just say I certainly agree with Eli and Laurie on that.
Okay, cool. Would anyone else in the body like to add to anything that Hildy said in terms of your understanding? Justin.
I think one of the, as Hildy was talking about that and thinking about our previous conversations, it's often the integrity to what. And I think that's a key distinction, is that in many organizations, and Laurie, I appreciate your comment, that we often think of integrity to the organization, which means, and oftentimes that gets boiled down to risk and finance. Like those are the two pieces. Like, what's our legal liability and what is our financial position, and can we sustain our organization, in light of all of that. And so I think the real shift here is that rather than asking that question, we're holding ourselves to, again, the values and the outcomes, and even asking questions about the process. So, that there is nothing that is sacred, like that there's sort of the integrity piece is actually, it's almost a piece that the pieces aren't integral. The integrity is making sure that we have the flexibility to ask the questions to even say, hey, we have this idea of catalytic thinking. Does it work? Like, not even was it applied, but there's latitude to actually really engage in efficacy kinds of conversations. Like, does it really work? And so then any structures or systems would also just follow that, which is there. So I guess sort of the short of it is, it's really what you're targeting your attention to, because I think lots of organizations have integrity. They're not going to say they don't have integrity, but it's really a question of to what components of your organization. And I think the difference is that we're really saying, again, this is echoing my meeting I just came out of, but we're talking about integrity to the design and sort of, core belief system, as opposed to integrity to the entity and the structures.
What you're saying, Justin, raises for me that all of the, duty of care, duty of loyalty, all of our fiduciary duties, those are a minimum. And those are specifically about fiduciary to the organization. And what we're talking about is a higher fiduciary, is a higher, to whom are we accountable for? To whom are we accountable? And it moves beyond this thing that is the organization that is in the nonprofit industrial complex held as sacred, coming straight out of the business world, that the sustainability of the business is the thing that matters, and the sustainability of any individual organization is not what matters. And yet legally, that is what board members are accountable for upholding, is making sure that the organization is, well, you know, that doesn't, what that gets us is strong organizations and still not anything happening in community. And so I'm really reflecting off of what you're saying, Justin. Thank you for that.
Also, I want to add that there is a tendency in that to devalue what's not on paper, or what's not the balance sheet, what's not the regulation. And so if you're looking at community, that focusing on the organization, I also think is what creates a competitive environment, because it is a scarcity mindset, as opposed to looking at the entire community and what that means. So it's a huge shift within most organizations, because most boards are personed by people of the business community that's their entire mindset when they're sitting on a board.
If I could use my position as chair for a moment, I shared something with a couple of you the other day, which I can post into the chat later on, by someone called Cassie Robinson, who's really thoughtful and innovative here in the UK. She's just been doing some work thinking about the future of grant making. And she uses a model called the 3 Horizons model that some of you might have come across before, where essentially the first horizon is what's sort of happening now. The second horizon is something where there's a bit of innovation, but the third horizon is about systems change and replacing what we've got already. And just looking at what she wrote the other day on issues around accountability, the first horizon, which is what we've got now, acts as if they are accountable to the board when it comes to grant making. The second horizon acts as if they are accountable to the grant seeker or the grant holder. And then the third horizon, which is the radical change, acts as if they are accountable to the system and the ambition of their work. And I think that, for me, that describes what we're aiming for, what's called third horizon thinking. So maybe we could come back to that another time. That's okay. So if I'm right, I think we have a shared understanding of what we mean by this integrity body and where we're going to. So the next part of the conversation, I'd like us to think about, okay, well, what does that look like in practice? What on a day-to-day basis would we as a board be doing if we were fulfilling that integrity role in relation to creating the future's work? Is that thinking about practically what we do, so actual activities? Is it about how we think and feel? And that's probably about our values. But even if we think that we're doing this right, do we still need to ask our questions about how do we ensure that we, as the integrity body, how do we ensure that we are holding ourselves to account and indeed holding others to account? So we probably need to think about that. But who'd like to kick us off? Practically, what are the things that we think we were doing? What are the behaviors that we would be seeing?
Well,
I'll kick off. So I think the first thing is that we need to know what people are actually doing. We'd need some way of being able to see or understand what they're doing, I think, and we need to take the time. We need to invest the time in seeing and understanding what people are doing. Would be my starter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll build on that. I mean, I think we've had some discussions in the past about specifically the board. I think what we're talking about now is how the board kind of connects with other aspects of I don't want to say necessarily the organization, the endeavor maybe is a better way. Is that right, Carl? Is that what you're thinking about where we're going with this? It sounds like with accountability, that would be like around how we're connecting to other.
Yeah, well, if we're thinking about creating the future, whether it's as a movement, as Eli told, or as part of a wider system, if we're not talking about just integrity to an organization, but integrity in relation to a system, right, what does that actually look like? It sounds good, but what would I see you doing, Angie?
Yeah, well, I guess I would part of this is you would see me practicing catalytic thinking and implementing that catalytic thinking process, which we've said is sort of what would guide us in making decisions. And it related, so I think that's directly related to your point about accountability, that there's some mechanism to see that that's happening. And also that, you know, there's sort of ongoing kind of learning from that taking place.
Okay, good. Would anyone like to build on that or offer a different perspective?
I think in the spirit, can you guys hear me? So whatever
Yes.
was with my mic is okay. I think in the spirit of catalytic thinking, we would see the board asking and listening, and having expectations that are clear to everybody, I guess. So as our also staff person, my knowing what is the board expecting, what is the board going to be asking about, let's pick one, fundraising or compensation or whatever. What is the board going to be asking to so that the board can fulfill its role in ensuring integrity? What can staff and volunteers and folks doing the work, what can they know ahead of time to say, yes, I am doing this in a way that aligns with our values? And so that there's no surprises, I guess. There's no gotchas. That this isn't a punitive system, that this is a lifting all boats system where everybody feels supported by the values, knows what that means, and that clear understanding is throughout the entire system.
So, Hildy, that implies to me that one of the things that we would need to do as the board is make sure that we ourselves are living the values in our work, because we can't then act as that integrity board if people don't see us upholding the values in our work.
I do think that there's a component of this, which is it's a learning piece. I'm trying to figure out how to make it that it's not really an oversight, but it's a learning and an appreciation piece, which is so much of that relationship between sort of operations and the board is reporting what happened and just saying this is what happened and asking the question what needs to happen. And so I think in terms of what it looks like that's different is our questions are actually questions that are driven by the answers that catalytic thinking developed. So which outcomes or values is this advancing for us? So if something's coming forward or sharing, we're launching a new initiative, rather than, I don't care what the initiative is. What I want to know is, what's been determined as the highest potential outcome of that initiative. In what ways do we think it's in alignment with our values? What did we say that it would take to do it, and have we been able to do that? Or not even actually what has it taken, but when you think about what you said it would take to do it, were we able to, or were you able to, or were those conditions put in place? So it's in some ways it's doing kind of a check against the catalytic thinking, but doing it in a way where we are actually investigating integrity of the system, share what the outcomes are, share how that's in alignment, share how well we're doing at putting the conditions in place that we said needed to be put in place. And then sort of being open, is there any perspective we can provide that would be beneficial? And and that, like, I don't, the piece that's making me a little antsy is I don't want to make it feel like we're just listening to what's been done, but at the same time, I think it's just learning how it's actually going as opposed to what happened. Like, I want to know the thinking behind it, because that's what we have integrity, not to what happened. We have integrity to, did the thinking happen? And, and perhaps in listening to that, we would certainly have, our own antenna going up saying, to Angie's point, that's not jibing with what I think the answers would have been if you had engaged in catalytic thinking, knowing that I'm not, or just the red flag saying, gosh, there's a concern I have. It seems like something's missing. Something wasn't considered. I'm not feeling confident in an explanation. I'll stop.
Justin, one of the difficulties with our not all being in the same room is I can't walk over and hug you. Just such beautiful clarity that, what was the high potential outcome we were reaching for, and the that our values are one of the conditions for success. And I love the question, which of our values are you seeing in each of these pieces, in each of the operational pieces? Which of our values are you upholding? What that question makes someone do is look at the values and potentially say, oh, none, or oh, we skipped number 3 entirely, or those kinds of. So I think that it's just a beautiful question in that it makes us touch back without being punitive. So thank you. This is yeah. The question that has stirred me for a while has been the very nuts and boltsy logistical question of, short of reporting every single thing that everybody's doing, how will the board know? I mean, what would it take for the board to know that we set our compensation policy rooted in our values? I mean, frequently boards know that in 2 ways. One, it has to do with money, so they have to approve it for something, and there's a decision. Or 2, something goes wrong, and neither of those is really being in integrity. So the question that keeps arising for me from a very practical standpoint is, what would mechanisms be that would help the board? We've talked so much about what good would look like. What would mechanisms be that create the conditions for that good? And so much of that winds up being after the fact.
It strikes me as difficult, doesn't it? Because in some respects, the simple answer I want to give is that you recruit good people who you believe share your values, who aren't going to game the system or play the system. But that's feasible at our scale of activity. It's not feasible at the scale of once you get into dozens of people or sort of something like that. So
good people in bad systems. Screw up. Individuals go where systems lead them, and so it really has been we're diving into so much, and if I can maybe take a minute and just share a little bit about what we're diving into, would that be helpful? Over the past couple of years, and obviously last year put everything on hold. Or to some extent, it shifted, extended the timeline. Over the past couple of years, we've had the realization that teaching, learning from our students and what they're bringing out into the world, doing demonstration projects has really all been proof of concept around catalytic thinking. What shifted in 2019, heading into 2020, was that we realized we don't need to prove anything anymore. We have got so much, it may not be in data form, but we have got so much qualitative and stories evidencing that catalytic thinking addresses our better angels, brings out what is possible, and especially, as Vu points out 100 times a day, moves us away from the incremental reactive approach to social change and moves us to aiming at what is possible and getting there. And we've proved that over and over and over again. Okay, 2019, we sort of decide it's time to take that and really share that broadly. And we're looking at two different ways of integrated ways of doing that. One is we stopped teaching directly in 2019. We made the decision to not do our immersion courses, which take an immense amount of time. They're hugely effective, but they help 6 people at a time. And if we're going to teach 6 people at a time, divide that by 7 billion, and yeah, I'm getting old as I think about it. And so sharing the education as much as possible, that we can develop the content, which we've done, but we don't have to deliver the content. We don't have to own it. Wouldn't it be wonderful? Angie is like living proof of this right now. If others can be teaching catalytic thinking in their own realms, so that you don't have to type in creating the future to know how to create systems change using catalytic thinking. So that was one piece of it, creating an education distribution system. That's a huge effort and has a million moving parts in it. The second piece was looking at the bigger piece within which all of that education resides, which is the reality that all of the systems we rely on internally in organizations, and it doesn't matter if it's social enterprise, it doesn't matter if it is nonprofit, it doesn't matter if it's government programs, they all have the internal workings that are pretty much the same. They all have accounting, they all have human resources, they all have those kinds of they all have leadership, they all have communications. Looking at all of those systems that we rely upon in social change and realizing that none of them was designed with the intention of creating systemic societal change. That all of those systems were either designed by, we wonder why we incrementally help one person at a time. Well, we've got thousands of years of church charity, which is what really created the framework for it led to the industrialist charity. It led to the we help one person at a time, we help one group at a time. We look at things like strategic planning. Strategic planning came out of the military. It came from Napoleon. We look at accounting and human resource practices, and all of those all came out of the business world. And when we look at all of those very simple structures that are, for the most part, very invisible within organizations, nobody would say to you, the reason we don't accomplish much in our community is our accounting system. But the reality is the reason we don't accomplish much in our community is our accounting system, because it accounts for money and it doesn't account for change. And every board looks at the P&L every month, but what's the report they look at for how is your community different this month than it was last year? And so what we're looking at and what this is all about is a two-phased sort of project. The second phase is that we engage the entire world, because this isn't just a United States issue or a North America issue. Everywhere I have ever taught around the world, everybody complains about the same stuff. And everybody uses pretty much the same systems. So the second phase of this is to engage as many people around the world as we can throughout the social change arena, the social change ecosystem, to say, let's create systems that actually reflect the world we want to see, that actually are intended specifically and intentionally for creating societal change, not adapting others that had other reasons for being. And so that's phase two, huge. Phase one is to engage people in experiments that we're already doing. So if phase two is an experiment, we're already experimenting. This is an experiment. The way we're building infrastructure via collective enoughness to start putting together a system that can share an IT person or share an accounting person. Looking at all of the experiments that we're currently doing and engaging people in that so that they will be part of it and hopefully change their own systems. And again, that's going to require, what this is all about, is that's going to require a lot more infrastructure than what we currently have. So what comes under that is hiring and compensation and quote unquote employee evaluation and all the HR practices. What comes under that is program design and program development and all of the tactical things that it's going to take to invite 100 people, 200 people, 500 people to our current experiments so that they learn, they experiment in their own organizations, and we document that and we share it with the world. So that eventually we build the critical mass where we can look at everything and say, look, we've been experimenting, you can experiment too. And let's all say that this is a question, it's not an answer. And we come to organizations as if organizations are the answer. And to be blunt, right now, the way organizations are structured for social change, they're a really shitty answer. I'm done now.
Okay, cool. I'm going to try and sort of then take us back to sort of where I think we just left, which was about practically then, what are we going to do on a day-to-day basis in terms of our role as a body to try and ensure that the vision that Hildy has just talked about, that comes alive. Because Hildy, especially as you're saying about going to phase two and the organization would get bigger and so on, it strikes me that the response is always to create systems. And then those systems, as you've argued, that people will go to wherever those systems sort of take them. So there's something about our role that's about an alternative way of thinking to those systems and processes. And Justin has just pointed out in the chat that any sort of system that we try and put in place so that we can monitor or listen to what's going on is going to fail. I mean, we're too distant, there are too few of us, so it's got to be something that's much more, or much different rather, to just saying we will put in place whatever system so that we can see or hear what's going on. There's got to be something different.
Well, and I'll share just a little bit more because I actually, the reason I dropped that in the chat was I wondered if we were going down a road where we're making an assumption that maybe is a wrong assumption. So I sort of go back to, rarely have I ever heard the staff say, gosh, the board really helped me make that decision. Or gosh, the board really helped improve that system. Or gosh, I needed the board to help me figure out how to do that. And so, we already made the declaration that the board shouldn't be making decisions because we're not in the best position. Well, the next logical step is, well, the board shouldn't then actually be making judgments about the systems because, again, we are, just as Carl, you were saying. So I'm just wondering, like, again, is that just a faulty premise that the board is actually a body that monitors operational integrity? Or sort of what I was framing there is, what would it take for staff to be able to have integrity around pursuing the values and the goals of the organization? And the thing that popped into my mind, because I see this lacking, an environment where we have conversations about our outcomes and how well we are aligning with our values. That piece is what I often feel is missing at organizations. Just like you said, Hildy, we don't have a values budget that we approve every year and go back and say, how are we progressing against our positive and negative values? Or, so I guess I'm sort of throwing that, gender reveal explosion bomb into this, which is it's our job just to do what we are doing, which is we create a space where we ask questions about what integrity looks like. But in the, in this case, right now, it is primarily, Hildy and Dimitri who are there, but is the board just actually a host for a particular type of operational question, which is not the tactical, how do we get it done question, but the how are operational decisions in alignment with the values, in alignment with the outcomes, where the board is actually not asking for the staff, just to use that terminology. They're not asking for the staff or the practitioners justify anything. We're simply saying we are the space that we have that conversation, and we're present for that conversation. But we're the hosts of it because we know it's important to you being successful that you have a sounding board and a designated space to talk about values, outcomes, and even catalytic thinking. Like even those of us who try to practice this, we run into, gosh, I didn't have time, or I short circuited. It would be nice if I could just sit down with 5 other people and work through a program design using catalytic thinking. So yeah, I guess that's where I'm just like, have we actually been doing it right all along?
Well, right and wrong is a judgment call. So we can start with that. What that's bringing up for me, Justin, is coming back, raising the conversation back up to the highest potential. What is the highest potential of the board's integrity work? What would specifically the board's integrity work make possible for the work of those of us doing the work?
I think it's to create emotional safety to be able to truly weigh in on what's happening, right? I hear a lot of discussion about thinking, but what are we feeling, right? A literal board level gut check and people checking in and saying, hey, this is kind of what's coming up for me about this thing and that thing. And if you were to create that level of safety that we can all express our opinions fully and transparently, that gets us closer to what's right for the broader the values and things we're trying to accomplish as a group. So I think a lot of time is to be spent around that feeling part, because that's, I believe, where the best decisions are made. They're not made from a level of thought or logic, but from a level of feeling. Is this just? Is this right? Does this sit well with me? That we hired this person or that person, or set the numbers at this rate or that rate. And I think we don't spend as much time in those spaces. So Hildy was in a workshop by Susan Bastfield, and she's a teal level, organizational coach. And that's kind of what came up, when you're dealing with complexity, you have to come back to those. Once again, are we safe? What are we feeling? Can we really disclose what's coming up for us? So I think that's a big part of the conversation.
That makes sense to me.
Susan is wonderful, Eli. Susan, she was
part
of our conversations because she's one of the board members at Inspiral.
Yeah, yeah.
So when we were first trying to pull this together, I love the connection there, because when we were first talking about not even the board, just talking in general about the organizational structure, Susan was a big part of that. So I'm really glad to connect it.
Yeah, I dropped your name. She's like, oh my God, I know Hildy. So your brand goes far and wide. I'm very touched by that.
Okay, so the question that we have now is that what would it be possible for us to achieve if the board fulfill this integrity role? So we've had one answer so far from Eli, which I really like and resonates for me. This idea that you create this emotionally safe environment where people can bring their whole selves to work, and they have the freedom to they have the freedom to get things wrong, actually. And you don't have innovation if you don't have some things going wrong, by definition. I mean, if everything that you do works, you're probably not going to innovate very much. So Eli, that really works for me, what you said.
I think there's something in the world's expectations of a board. You know, right or wrong, whatever, that the board's integrity work answers. You know, the world sort of expects the board to be in charge. And that's not just here, that's in any organization, is ha ha ha. But that's what the world expects. And so I think there's something powerful in the board saying, this is whatever we figure out, it is in practice. This is, our job is integrity. Our job is making sure we're walking the talk of our values, and whatever we decide, here's how we do it. I think sends like a really powerful message, both to people who are traditionalists. Oh, okay, yeah, that sounds good, and they tick the box. Or especially to folks like Lori, who is on a board that is thinking about doing things differently, like the people that Justin's working with that are thinking about doing things differently, to say, oh, okay, yeah, maybe that's a question we can be asking. So I think it furthers our work. Yeah, it furthers our goal, which is that we see systems change throughout the social change ecosystem.
Could I add to that? Hilda, you and I shared a blog post the other day from Volunteer Commons, if you remember, and the title of this blog post was "Trading Measurement for Witnessing what volunteers do," and I think it really struck a chord with both of us, because essentially what it was saying is that we spend too much time trying to measure what the impact of volunteering is, and actually one of the most powerful things that we could do is just be there and sort of see the magic and witness what's going on. And this conversation is reminding me of that, and it says to me that one of the things that that this makes possible, doing it in this way, is to demonstrate to people that there is another way, that the only route to success is not measuring everything to within an inch of its life, and that actually by finding a different way to create the space that Justin talked about, and then having the evidence of your own eyes by sort of seeing this sort of sometimes, that actually that can also lead to success, that there are different ways of motivating people. There are different ways of achieving outcomes other than just constantly sort of putting systems in place that are about measuring activity. Okay.
Justin, do you want to talk a little bit about what you put in the chat?
Sure. I think, you know, if we're good at our integrity, because I think all of this is pointing towards, like, we're depowering the board. I mean, it really is. I mean, we're dismantling it to something really core, which, you know, it's, if the board is here to support the staff, because the staff is actually the entity, or practitioners, because I know with creating the future, it's a little vague, but I'm going to say the operational people. If our job is to support them, because they are actually the fulcrum for delivering on any of the outcomes or enacting any of the values, we serve them. So our integrity helps them have integrity. And I love actually what Eli said, because it was you took sort of what was peaking in my brain and really gave some concreteness to it, which is the board creates spaces. We create integrity spaces, and what we've defined integrity spaces is when we talk about, are our values presenting themselves. So, and I think that, and actually, Carl, what you added in that witnessing, like that's the board. When I said that the board needs to trust the operating people, they just have to be witness to their integrity. Like I don't have integrity. it's the operational folks that have the integrity that we're concerned about. So we are just witness, and I do think, again, I come back to the fact that this type of integrity conversation, integrity to outcomes, values, beliefs, I don't see it very much. And so if we already have a structure which is boards meet and hold space, well, let's use that space differently in a way that's actually supportive of staff. I mean, imagine, Vu, you are sort of the most recent person in an ED position. Imagine if you no longer had to report to the board, you and a staff. Like if you just didn't have to do that anymore, if you just knew that there was once a month you were going to have a conversation where you and the board were witnessing the values and outcomes in action.
Yes.
Sorry. Maybe it's the drugs.
One of the things that I've been really pondering is the initial role of the integrity board. Initial as in this is new, and staff and other organizations and people that we're engaged with, that the whole concept is different. So some of the role I see in an integrity board is assuring the staff and the other folks that it's okay to be creative. It's okay to work toward this malleable approach toward the final outcome versus this is how we want it done. This is how you're going to do it. And I think after a while that will be pretty clear. But initially, there's going to be a period of time when staff or whoever is going to look to the board because, as we mentioned earlier, people have their own preconceived notions of what a board is. So, this organization, this entity is going to be assuring them that it's okay to be working toward these value outcomes and that they're supported. And that's, echoing what you just said, Justin, but I see it as being intense at the beginning because people aren't going to expect that. I don't care who they are. Their expectations in the world is that the board is the overseer and that they must meet the expectations of the overseer, as opposed to it's someone who is encouraging them and helping them and supporting them. So I just want to be cognizant of the fact that their initial period is going to be a little bit different for an integrity board until this organization, this entity, is well established and is used as a model for other entities, so that they could say, "Oh, look, this is how we could do this."
My head just went boom. So I just want to share with you what.
Go on, Hildy.
And first of all, if any of you watching noticed like snickers while Dimitri was talking, it wasn't that we were snickering at Dimitri. It was at a side comment about the adorable unicorns sitting behind Vu. As you were talking, Justin and Dimitri, I had a flash on parents and kids, and I had a flash specifically on teenagers. That we can do one of two things. We can trust teenagers or we can not trust teenagers. We know the outcome when we don't trust teenagers. It usually sucks. Or we can build values and integrity into how we have been parenting since the time they were this big, and have trust in our kids. I remember when Lizzie, who is now twice this age, more than that, was 16, I realized that my job as a parent, unless she was going to do something immensely stupid, which I knew at that point she wouldn't do, that my job as a parent was to say, that sounds great, honey. And eventually that she would grow into having that reinforcement. So I'm thinking about parents and kids, and I'm thinking about the fact that what parents do, especially for teenagers, is they do hold the space for that piece of integrity. They do have conversation. How do they, quote, do their work? They sit around the dinner table and they talk about what's happening. They ask questions. Sometimes those questions are probing, sometimes those questions are not. We will have specific kinds of questions that we'll be asking. But that whole piece of witnessing, I'm brought back to, oh my gosh, this is 6-7 years ago, when we were talking about employee policies. We had our first non-founder employee, and we wanted to have employee policies. And I remember, Carl, I think you know Liam Barrington Bush, talking about we can have policies, but policies are a substitute for conversation. And that has stuck with me for so long, that we have policies so that it makes it easier, so that we can shortcut having conversation. And we don't do that with when we do that with our kids, it's never good. When we have the conversation that says, this is the rules, this is my house, those are never fun conversations, and they usually don't end well. When we have conversation, though, real conversation, we want to listen, we want to learn. That is a way to show our kids that we trust them. And we are witnessing, and it's, tell me how your day was. Tell me, Eli, to your point, tell me how you felt about that. Creating that space of emotional safety. And what's occurring to me that it might look like when the board is doing its integrity work is the kitchen table, is our talking about what's gone on this month. What's the stuff, Hildy's the 16-year-old. Tell me how your day was, honey, and tell me how you felt about that. And talking about that through the lens of values, and encouraging those conversations around the lens of values. So if for instance, one of the things that we are talking about as we build out even just the first phase of this experimenting, we're going to need to hire staff. And as we are thinking about this, what walks the talk of our values, we're really looking at compensation, a universal basic compensation. That if what creates sustainability and comfort and stability in a human being's life is $70,000 to $80,000 in salary, then everybody will get $70,000 to $80,000 in salary. And that when we make these ridiculous distinctions, that a CEO makes X bazillion dollars and the janitor makes, $15 an hour because we think that's a living wage, the minimum wage. Try to live 6 months without the CEO. Easy to do. We all know that. Try and live 6 months without the janitor. Try and live 2 days without the janitor. So if you've got somebody who is essential, we will honor them by saying this is what a stable wage is. But as we're doing that, to be able to have the conversation, how was your day, dear? Oh, well, we're thinking about this compensation policy. Wow, okay, let's talk about that. And so I really love just in the thought of it being a conversation, and really thinking about it through the lens of how we talk to our teenage kids, how we talk to our young adult kids, and that whole place of witnessing and holding space and creating emotional safety, to really talk through. Okay, if that's what's going on, that sounds really cool. How does it look through an equity lens? How does it look through a power lens? There's just something about that just feels natural, and does go counter, as you said, Dimitri, to what others expect, but meets the expectation. I'll stop talking now.
So for anyone watching, I am doing an absolutely awful job of facilitating this conversation, because the questions that we were hoping to go through, I'm now worried that we're not going to have enough time. So I'm going to try and just move on a little bit, if that's okay. And I'm going to ask the question that what conditions would we need to put in place for us to perform the role that we've just talked about? Does that require us to start to think about what are our current strengths and weaknesses? Are we able to have the conversations that we just talked about? Are there any blockers that might be stopping us from playing this role? So what do we need to put in place so that we can perform this role? What are the conditions that we're going to need?
Carl, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to do this, but I feel like we are not done with the previous conversation, and it's hard to know what the conditions need to be until we get that maybe further resolved. And maybe everybody else is okay with proceeding, but I feel a little bit uncomfortable with the parent teenager. Is it metaphor? Metaphor, is that the right word? I always confuse metaphor and simile. I don't know. Anyway, there's an inherent power differentials there that are at play too. And I was thinking about, but I agree with a lot of what you've said, Hildy, and everybody else. And I was just thinking about, though the part of our conversation is sort of implied that there is a separation between the staff and the board in a way that I'm not sure has to exist. And I was thinking about sort of my experiences being active in our union as I'm the grievance officer for our union, which means that I am often doing work to help people navigate our collective bargaining agreement and helping them, helping basically resolve issues that come up when there are conflicts. And we have an executive committee of representatives from across the campus that, as grievance officer, we meet together and I can raise issues that I'm trying to help people deal with. And together we basically converse until we figure out like what's a good strategy for addressing these issues vis-a-vis the collective bargaining agreement. Now, the collective bargaining agreement is a document that's, negotiated with the administration, and ultimately, I wouldn't say it represents all of our values as a union, but it does represent this idea of, the importance of democratic workplace democracy, and that everyone should be able to have a say in, these governance structures that we negotiate. And in a way, like that document, right, is what we go to say, okay, here's the issue. What does the contract say that we can maybe leverage to make some issue happen? Or that, in our case, we have our values document that in a way is that, right? It's our agreement that these are the values that kind of represent, and we can go to those and say, okay, here's an issue that comes up. How do we resolve it vis-a-vis those values? And but I guess the bottom line that I'll stop talking is that this board and whomever else is involved in the organization as a staff person or what have you, we're a body that can work together to figure out issues. Like, we're not just as a board witnessing, but we're part of trying to, put together all of our collective ideas to come up with the best or at least one way to resolve an issue, or hopefully make somebody's life better, which at the end of the day, that's what my role as a grievance officer is hopefully someone's better off at the end of, that process. So I'm going to stop talking.
Angie, well, first of all, I'm sorry I tried to move us on before I gave you a chance to say that, because that was was really helpful. Would anyone like to respond to what Angie said then? Because I'm not sure that was necessarily incompatible with what we talked about before, actually.
Thank you. First of all, I realize that I'm projecting my parenting with my kid into what parenting looked like, because my kid's mostly been in charge of my life since she was born. So that's
yeah, I'm there too with you, but anyway.
I know, and I definitely appreciate it. And what you brought me back to, Angie, is what is the whole draw a fish thing. We have got to stop saying board, and we've got to stop calling it a board meeting. And I scribbled down, we're all in this together. We are all co-participants in the work. And if we're all co-participants in the work, and for legal purposes, we have to have a board, And for appearance purposes, that board needs to look like whatever. And okay, great. But we're all co-participants in the work, and that this is a monthly integrity meeting. And that this is a monthly alignment meeting or a monthly whatever, support meeting, however, whatever we want to call it. But that we pull the word board out of it, that we completely pull the word board out of it. And the people who are legally designated to be our board members happen to attend, and other people attend. And that there's just something and that really jumped for me while you were talking, Angie, is that we're all in this together.
So
yeah, there is no answering to.
Hildy, at the risk of me taking us down a rabbit hole, I've really enjoyed the conversation, and one of the things that it's made me think about is first, I've read quite a few things recently that have talked about how across society we are losing the ability and the art to disagree with each other, and that strikes me as quite important, because if we're going to work out what a good society should look like, we've got to be able to come together and discuss, and at times and disagree and hold different positions and so on. So the second thing is that it's made me think about a guy some of you might have come across called Mike Edwards, who used to be at the Ford Foundation, wrote a book on civil society. And when he said, what is civil society? He said, well, it's three things. It's the associational life. Lots of people coming together and sort of doing things. And then he said, it's the space where you come together and you talk about what a good society looks like. So Justin and Eli, before we would talk about how it's the role of the board to create that space. And then finally, he said, civil society is the place where we come together and we discuss what a good society should look like. And all that is making me think that what you've described as a board, what you've described as this group of people, is that it's our role to hold that space and to facilitate and create those discussions where people can come and be themselves and talk about what a good society looks like and what our role is in creating that good society. So to almost go on to my next question about what needs to be in place for that to happen, it strikes me that we've got to have skills and knowledge as individuals about how to hold those conversations. We've got to have the skills for how to create that space so that we can come to these meetings and we can hold different points of view, and we can disagree with each other sometimes, but we can do so in a way that whereby we're disagreeing about the issues or about the way that we're going to try and do things. We're not disagreeing with each other as individuals or as people. And I just think that's important because, again, as a society, I'm not sure that we're very good at doing that anymore. So that integrity that you sort of talk about, I think that plays out in different ways. And so that it's not just about an integrity of creating the future as an organization, but there's the integrity of the process and the conversation. Crikey, that was a bit long. I didn't mean to do that.
It was good, Carol.
So can I try and again just ask the question: what do we need to put in place so that we can perform this role? What are the conditions that we're going to need so that we can do these things?
I think you just said a big piece. I'm sorry, go ahead, Eli.
No, I just want to say that I appreciate what you said about renaming the unit, right? And also, if everyone is collaborating and co-facilitating and co-leading, right, either from an operations on the ground standpoint or from a high level visionary standpoint, what does it look like for the two to work together, right? Are there going to be blended meetings with everyone on deck to openly share their thoughts, their ideas, wins, losses, that kitchen table discussion? The board meeting is this closed meeting. Well, this one isn't, but board meetings are typically, right, separate from staff meetings. So I'm wondering what the cross-pollination and the merger of those two would look like logistically. Is there a cadence where there might be like a advisory board meeting, but is there also a meeting where everyone is welcome to the table? even the janitor is there to give their perspective on what's happening on the ground. As part of the structure and as a system of that ongoing collective conversation where everyone feels that they can contribute and be heard and help to put the man on the moon, so to speak, or the woman, or all, a being.
Okay. Would anyone like to follow Eli?
There's a piece there about invitation. There's a piece there about, yeah, I love what you said about, normally operations and vision. And the truth is, with most nonprofit boards, at least, and the for-profit boards that I've seen, there's no discussion of vision. There's no discussion of there's discussion of what do we think everybody else is doing, and those kinds of things. But no concerted. Yeah, and so the piece about what needs to be in place. Carl, your note about the skills to create and hold the space, to facilitate the conversations, to further the mission with integrity to our values, those skills, I think are huge. And there's a big piece in what you said, Eli, in terms of invitation, making it clear that everybody's invited. It is the rare person, and Lori, I'm so grateful for you being here today, because it is the rare person who feels, I don't even know what the word is, that they really are welcome, that steps forward. Lori actually sent an email and said, I'd like to be there. So frequently the people who are at these meetings are people we've invited, rather than the general invitation that people actually feel comfortable. So what does it take for folks to, as you said, Eli, to know that they are welcome? So there's a big piece in there about that. And picturing it as a really big kitchen table conversation, who all is in that conversation and how do they know that they're welcome?
Eli, I really like the point about clarity of expectations, because I think a lot of time people will come to these conversations and there are sort of almost like the written rules about who can say something or what they can say, and then there are the unwritten rules about who can say what. So I think there's something about setting norms about how everyone is able to say whatever they want, and we're very clear that we expect people to join in. So we talked about expectations. There's a bit about skills and knowledge. What else might, what other conditions do we need so that we can perform this integrity role? So people are a bit quiet. So can I just ask, is actually one of the answers then to not overcomplicate it and to actually keep it quite simple, and therefore we don't need to add anything else?
Yeah, I think so. And we also, we've had some discussions about this previously too. And I think going back to some of those would be good maybe to revisit, but we don't necessarily have to take time to do it now. But like, for example, just understanding catalytic thinking process and our values, just basic things about like that too.
There's a blog post that I'll put into the chat that also has a summary of all of our conversations to date in terms of who will be impacted and what does accountability mean, and I can put that into the chat. Okay,
that sort of takes us on to the next question that I asked you before we started, which is, what do we now need to prioritize if we're going to behave and act in this integrity role? Are there any decisions that we need to make today? or if again, if the idea that we need to make any decisions sort of like goes against everything that we said, is it instead the case that are there any actions that we need to take as a result of the conversation today?
I'm almost wondering, given what we've talked about, that we're all co-participants, we're all in this together, that this is a monthly place. I love your framing, Carl, and I don't remember who the gentleman is, the coming together in the space to come together. If this is the space to come together as co-participants in affecting our mission, in making sure that our mission happens, what would you all like to see be the structure of our next meeting? As the staff person, what conversation would you like me to bring into the room? What conversation would we like guests to bring into the room? What would you like the conversation to look like?
I guess one of the things that I think about, given some of the transition that you've talked about, Hildy, is, what are some of those structural questions that are being considered? So let's create the space. So if the compensation, what are the questions we need to be thinking about for compensation that align with our values? I think that, so kind of goes back, Carl, in terms of, well, what needs to be in place or what has to be true for us to be able to do that is the board has to have, or this body, when we just need to know what's being introduced. What are the considerations that are operationally being considered that that are substantive enough for this kind of conversation? Because I don't think every decision, every operational thing warrants, designed by committee or consensus. But I do think that there is, that's a significant transition. Like we're now looking to really have a compensated staff model, or even sort of retroactively, you talked about there was a shift in the educational strategy. Like that would have been the type of thing potentially to bring forward to say, we're thinking of doing something different operationally. Can we talk through not it, but what are the values and outcomes considerations that we are exploring that are that's there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I would think, is that sort of these things that are substantive shifts in structure or strategy. And then I also think that there are, because of the nature of what we're doing, some of these fundamental design questions, like this notion of what a board body is, what it's responsible for. I think those are also, if, we did it with the 990. So we know we have to file a 990. What would a 990 look like that would be productive of this? Well,
sorry,
I was just going
to.
to. Well, I just had one piece that I think really echoes Eli, and I certainly don't want to put Lori on the spot, but I also think is there this avenue of having a space where people can come forward to say, we know creating the future asks these kinds of questions. Can we insert one? because we're trying to sort something out in our own organization or something that the way you talk about things and your relationship to similar issues might be interesting to get a take on it.
I would well, first let me say our organization is not as clearly along this path as you guys are. So I'm not sure what we're doing or have done will be all that helpful for this group. But and what I'm recognizing is the things that we have done have been more formal steps built on, you know, the traditional hierarchy of an organization and a board. But we clearly always have staff in our board meetings. But just before the pandemic and shortly after I became president, one of the things I started doing was going to all staff meetings and encouraging other board members to attend when they could, just to start breaking down this board versus staff mentality that we are working towards a common goal. And when we can, we should come together and talk about whether it's operational things that they're discussing at the staff meetings or whether it's planning and hierarchical kind of things we talk about at the board meetings, that we don't need to have these artificial walls for people to cross-pollinate and that. Obviously with the pandemic that changed a bit and we're not doing any of those things other than Zoom, and that's a poor substitute for those kind of conversations. But I will say that a couple of the things that have been expressed, I'm struggling in my own world of living in a hierarchy and used to work for government for 40 years. And that's the transition from one to the next thing we want to be. And so that's what I'm doing a lot of thinking about. Is I hear lots of great thoughts and ideas, and I'm trying to figure out how we get from where we are to where that is. So that's what I'm thinking of.
Sounds good, Laurie, and sounds interesting as well. And maybe we could even help you in future meetings with that. But let's go back to Hildy's question. What would we want future meetings to look like?
So I'm thinking about newer folks that are coming in and want to help. I saw the link to the kind of deeper catalytic thinking video. I'm wondering if there could be like some sort of like, e-learning type, very short, brief kind of crash course that people can kind of complete with metrics and can be sort of like a mini certification process to indicate where someone is on the path of learning, understanding, and applying catalytic thinking. I know intuitively what it is and how it works, but I think I have a lot of work to do to fully have it resonate in everything that I do. Right. I think it's an ongoing journey. Like Laurie said, they're at this stage and going to this future state where it's embedded in all of your systems. So if there could be some sort of like certification, even for those that are coming in to be part of the integrity board, this could be really powerful because it's an objective way to see where everyone is on their path to, engendering mastery in this craft. So Salesforce has, certifications, that go from like, a particular module to an admin to a certified platinum, partner with them. So as we start to use that software, it's been really helpful to kind of quickly gauge where someone is in their path towards helping us with this huge goal. So I think this could be very helpful for CTF to kind of like be able to quickly gauge where people are, and also as a way to engage and to make it easy to simply just go in, log in, create a login, check, watch 10 minutes, take a little quiz, and then you kind of have this kind of like specific credential that kind of indicates and shows us where you are in the process.
Thank you, Eli. Mm-hmm. Other thoughts?
I'm coming back to the questions that Justin asked maybe an hour ago. um, and I do like the thought. I do like your suggestion, Carl, that maybe we're overthinking this. That if what we're talking about is having a conversation that touches to, we're all in this together, we're all, because none of you are, quote, just board members. All of you are engaging in creating the future in so many different ways. And we're co-participants in making this happen. And the separation that Lori was talking about, which is so real for 99.99999% of all organizations everywhere, is that the board keep your damn hands out of the work. And we're just the opposite. If we're all in this together and there is no hierarchy and there is no wagging finger and there is no I have to answer to the board, it creates a very, very different way of being together. And I'm really loving just the simplicity of what you suggested, Justin, in terms of what are some of the big structural issues that we're talking about, and going through the exact questions that are catalytic thinking questions. That when each of those, so if compensation or whichever one is the one that we're going to talk about, what is the highest potential outcome that this thing that we're thinking about doing is intended to accomplish? What are the conditions that we have identified that need to be in place for that? And the values being one of those conditions. Where does, I love the question of which of our values does this uphold? And to have that be the introduction to the topic and then talk about it, it seems deliciously simple and doable and human and emotionally safe and all of the things that we're talking about, without overthinking it, without overcomplicating it. Yeah, there just seems like there's really good stuff there.
Okay. I had a couple of things left on my list, and I'm conscious of time. We've not got a huge amount left. I'd like us all to wrap up and reflect on today, which, judging by the number of us, is going to take us a good 10 minutes. But just before I do that, can I just ask, maybe I'm just asking the same question in a different way, but is there anything that any of us personally need as a result of the conversation so that we can undertake this integrity role? So Eli, you've talked about us all really sort of getting a much deeper understanding of catalytic thinking, but is there anything else that we might have missed?
No, maybe it's kind of more of like incorporating kind of this kind of feeling kind of check, as we go through the process. At the beginning, at the end of the meetings, I've ever since being in Susan's workshop, I just kind of feel like it's a really important piece to have systematically built in. Stephanie, my partner, is a psychologist, and even using kind of like the weather as a metaphor, right? For those that might find it challenging to weigh in on feelings, are we sunny? Are we cloudy? Are we, having some thunderstorms? That could be so helpful to create that space, that invitation to bring what's inside, to the forefront. So that's what I can think of that could help deepen that safety that we're all trying to get to as a group.
Okay, good. Thank you, Eli.
We do that, Eli, with our meetings that are not published. And that was, and early on, and this is we do it because this is the way we've done it, which makes no sense, but early on, when there was a reticence about we're open, we're public, how vulnerable do we want to be? We sort of established that we would ask that maybe privately beforehand, but not necessarily in public. And maybe now that's a good time to, question that particular thing. Does our modeling what it looks like to be okay with being human with each other is probably way different than it was in 2013 when we first started opening the door and going, ooh, how do we want to be with each other? So yeah, thank you for that reminder. It's a really good one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, we're approaching the end of our meeting, so I think it's really important that we reflect and we think about what we've heard today and what's resonated for us, what's been important. Would anyone like to begin?
I'll begin and say thank you, Carl, for guiding us today. I think the conversation's been really helpful in a lot of ways, and I guess the sort of issue around getting, if we can, past these divisions in our, the organizational roles is something that I'm really interested in continuing to explore. And then also, I guess to your question earlier about what do I still need, or I guess I'm trying to still figure out about inviting other people to this conversation and from a board recruit or not board, whatever we're calling this group, or recruitment, bringing more people in to have these part of these discussions. We had a lot of discussion, last meeting about, and I guess, yeah, figuring out what that actually looks like to do it next time, or keep, yeah, that's all I have to say.
Okay. Thank you, Angie. Who would like to follow Angie? Vu, you've been very quiet today, and I know Mondays are a bad day for you because you've been working hard on blogging and so on. Did anything resonate for you today, Vu?
Thanks, Carl. Yeah, and apologies. I tend to absorb a little bit before I start randomly spouting out my opinions on stuff. And it's probably best for everyone that way. So I appreciate the conversation. I do think that maybe we do tend to overthink, and also we are missing a huge part, which is the staffing, right? And I don't want us to move too far ahead of people that we'll be working with. So I think that's important. I do think another element of integrity is ensuring the sort of representation of what we're trying to do. And as we move forward, I think that's going to be critical, is again, that we have more women of color on the board. Yeah, but I appreciate that we have these conversations because this is hard. And I think one of the reasons why I'm quiet is because I haven't really figured out, and I don't think a lot of people in our sector has figured out a really good board model. And that's kind of what we're doing here. So I'm just really interested in what you all are thinking, because I think we can all acknowledge that what's happening hasn't been working. And oftentimes it's very destructive to the work and to the entire sector. So I don't know. I like this third horizon thing where we're thinking about not just our own organization, but what is good for the entire sector. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Vu. That's interesting for me what you just said, and in fact one of my reflections was going to be how bloody hard this is, actually, and sometimes it must to me it must look from the outside, people watching us, that we don't know what we're doing, and that's because we don't. Because there's no template, is there? We're sort of trying to find an alternative to as Vu just said, some ways of doing things that on one level have worked very well, but on another level have not worked very well at all. Dimitri, how's today been for you?
Lots to thank you, Carl, and thank you for facilitating today, Carl. Appreciate that. Lots to think about. I'm reflecting on Eli's comments on basically creating a training process, an educational process for prospective participants. And what I'm thinking about is this becomes something for other organizations as much as for this organization. in understanding how this could apply in their workplace and giving them the tools to be able to share it with others. Because not every board member can participate in every meeting. They can watch them, obviously, but if they have a way of communicating with this. So down the line, I see that that kind of process could have more impact than just what Creating the Future is doing. That it could take the models and help other organizations that are struggling with the same exact issues that we are, the tools to begin to address it themselves. So that's kind of what I've left reflecting upon with today's meeting.
Good. Thank you, Dimitri. Justin, your microphone is off, so you can go next.
Oh. I was sort of chuckling in my head because I was thinking about the times when, you know, something goes wrong and like the response was, well, what were you thinking? Like that's how we like react. And so I just go back to what sort of Eli was saying. It's, well, because we never create the opportunity to talk about what we're thinking. We always talk about what we're doing or what we're deciding. And yeah, like I feel like part of why this is so hard is not because it's hard to design something that would be effective. I think that's hard. What's hard is we're starting to unpack all of this underlying thinking that we're actually like in tension with, all the shoulds, all the what ifs, and I think, like I am just reflecting, I said it a little bit earlier, somewhat tongue in cheek, but have we already been doing it? Like we felt like over the past years, it's been like, well, where are we going? Where are we going? When in truth, we might have been actually sitting in this space that we hadn't named yet, which was we're trying to figure out what we're thinking because we don't want someone to come back and say, what were you thinking? Like we're like, here's what we're thinking. Anybody got any opinions on what we're thinking? And so that to me just seems so so much of a release and so powerful of a model. I still don't quite know how or what it takes to make it happen consistently, and I think we still need to ask this question. It's just have a space where we're talking about what we're thinking and
Justin,
feeling. To Eli's point.
Justin, you just made me think that one of the hardest things that you do when you design these sorts of processes and so on, one of the hardest things to do is to make things simple. And you said that what we're trying to do is something relatively simple, which is design a space where we can talk about not just what we're doing, but what we're thinking. And just talk about how to behave with integrity. And in some respects, that's a very, very simple thing. But that's the hardest thing to do, to do those simple things. I don't know if any of you can hear, but my church bells are ringing in the background that says it's 8 o'clock in the evening here. And I did warn a couple of you beforehand that I have another board meeting at 8 o'clock. So I'm going to have to go in a couple of minutes. Hildy, could you take over the facilitating? Would that be okay?
I will. Do you have any additional reflections to share? I'm just so grateful to you for running the meeting today.
Well, first of all, facilitating you lot is bloody hard. And I was really nervous about that actually, but you've made it. You have made this a really good meeting in my opinion. But I think though what it has made me think is that bit before about the space, the things that Eli and Justin said about creating the space, and I wonder if one of the things that has come out for me today is that we all just think it's dead easy, and like you just get people to talk and that's it. And actually an awful lot of work has to go into creating a space where people can engage. So I think that's one of my reflections. my other reflection is that it's been really nice having Jackie and Laurie join us, and Eli, you're still relatively new, and I think it's, for me, I think it's really enriching the conversation by having people come along and talk to us, and I hope that very much continues. And I think what I'm really looking for in future meetings is getting these different perspectives and just getting a sanity check for ourselves about, actually, do we overcomplicate things sometimes, and actually are we able to recognize when we've done something that's good enough? And I think that having people like Laurie and Jackie join us, I think that's going to help us with that.
Thank you for being you during our meeting today.
Thank you, Carl, facilitating.
Yeah, thank you, Carl. I think you
Great
did some
job.
great facilitating, and you were a great role model for me today. So thank
That's
you.
lovely. Thank you. I'm so sorry I have to leave you, but if I'd shared better, we'd be done by now.
You're herding cats, honey. So
it's really good to see you. And Laurie and Jackie, I'll just say the last thing I'll say is that I've said to Hildy on many occasions that this is sort of 2 hours of me time where I get to hear people and do some of what Justin talked about, I think, of thinking time. So it's been really nice for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you, Carl.
Bye, Carl.
Eli, have you done your reflection?
I think a little bit, but basically inspired, happy to contribute to this creation of a very safe place to do this work together. And glad to see a couple new faces here today. And looking forward to checking up on the at least 10 people I've mentioned CTF to. So hopefully, to Vu's point, we're going to see a lot more women of color on this panel. I've been working really hard to drop, little crumbs here and there to get people to start looking at the website, and then hopefully I can follow up and get us some more melanin in the room. So appreciate all of you.
For us deficient folk. Thank you so much. And you and I will definitely have a conversation. That'll be awesome. That'll be awesome. Laurie, what is standing out to you from our conversation today?
So this has been great. Like I said, I think Carl was a good role model as a facilitator, because I think often as president, I'm just so intense on, we have an agenda, we have to get through the agenda in an hour and a half. That doesn't create a space for people to just share what they're thinking and feeling. So I've got work to do there. I appreciate when you've included in the chat links. I've saved them all, so I'm going to go and do my work and lots of reading. I do want to say that you have created a very welcoming space. I will say that when I saw that it seemed like maybe I was the only non-board member, I thought, oh, was I supposed to just be listening and not being on the Zoom? But you made me feel totally comfortable, which I greatly appreciate, because I was worried at the beginning.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And you were not supposed to be the only one today.
Okay.
we had someone else who wound up in a budget meeting, and you can bet he would rather be here than in a budget.
Oh, sure.
But thank you for being here. One of the things that I was struck by is your talking about what does it take to get your board from where they are to where they want to be, or and where they have the potential to be. And it's a really big part of what we're stepping into next, is that if we're all experimenting together and sharing what we're learning together, that we sort of learn from each other, and we have those conversations, then little drips of something come in. Oh, I could just ask one question differently for now. I don't have to do everything. I really appreciated that. Jackie, this is your first time with us. Did anything in particular stand out to you as you were listening intently?
I guess the thing that stood out to me most is how conscientiously you all would kind of check each other to make sure that you were coming back to really the intention of the questions, and how that seemed to just flow so naturally, and that it really stood out as being just a very intentional conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for your taking the initiative to be part of this group. We're looking forward to seeing you next time and next time after that. I think that is all of us. Yes, I will, before I share my reflection. This was a wonderful, energizing conversation, and sort of I could feel my shoulders relax in this conversation. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a really, really, really long time, because there is so much going on operationally, and so much that we're stepping into that is brand new, some of which I know how to do, some of which I don't know how to do, and figuring all of that out and being able to have the conversation. So first of all, what I'm reflecting on is just feeling my shoulders relax, feeling that emotional safe space, and feeling just such deep, deep, deep gratitude. I'm also smiling at Carl's. I wrote down verbatim, it looks like we don't know what we're doing because we don't. Creating the future is an experiment. It is a grounds for experimenting. If we knew the answer, we wouldn't have to experiment. If the systems looked like this everywhere, we wouldn't have to experiment. And experimenting means, I don't know, it may work out this way, it may work out. Here's my hypothesis about how it's going to end up. I have no idea if it's going to end up that way. And, you know, I've been talking about, at the end of 2019, we prepared for 2020 to be the launching of all of this. How do we scale our impact? How do we make it more general? That was sort of taken a bit off course last year, but led to a lot of thinking and a lot of conversation. And what's been interesting is we know in order to staff up and put in the infrastructure that we're going to need to raise money. And part of me keeps kicking myself. You've been talking about raising money for a year, and we haven't done the raising money part. Where is the income? Where is the revenue? And then I sit myself down and I say, we are investigating entirely new ways of resourcing a social change organization that doesn't feed into the power dynamics, that is post-capitalist, post-colonial. What does that look like? And that my beating myself up of, you said we needed to raise money so that we could hire, and where is it? And what have you been doing is where that usually comes. How come it's not done yet? And suddenly Carl says, it looks like we don't know what we're doing because we don't. Well, we're stepping into we're experimenting with entirely different ways of thinking about resourcing, of thinking about raising money, of thinking about talking to people about the work that we're doing, engaging them rather than asking them for money. What does that look like? Well, of course it's going to take longer because we're stepping into something that hasn't been done before, that we're experimenting with, and that it's putting the pieces in place for the experiment. And then right now, we're finally at the point where we're able to have those conversations and ask people to contribute to this. But it's, so for me personally, this has been really, really helpful in just a reassuring that while we're experimenting, it's going to take longer. It's going to take us multiple conversations that seem like they may have been the same conversation over and over again until we come to a place where, as you say, Justin, have we been living this and we just need to stop overanalyzing it? So I'm just really, really, really grateful to all of us for the conversation, and looking forward to next time. So thank you all, and we will see you in a month. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.